What if asking doesn't withdraw from your social capital, but is actually an investment into it? So many of us stay silent because we don't want to seem like a burden or we want to be able to prove ourselves. But as the research shows, asking can actually improve your relationships, your opportunities, and even your earning potential. So grab your cup of tea and let's talk about the power of asking. So, number one, I want to start with an idea that I just recently discovered when I read Ali Abdaal's book, Feel Good Productivity. And he has so many really interesting research backed ideas in this book that I almost want to immediately read it again. But this one really stood out to me because I actually hadn't heard of it before in all of the books that I've read about productivity. This was the first time that I actually recall seeing this. And this was, number one, the idea of the Benjamin Franklin effect. And this is this almost counterintuitive idea in psychology that when someone does you a favor, they actually become more fond of you. And this was, of course, as the name implies, inspired by Benjamin Franklin and a scenario that he encountered in his life with someone who was a political rival. And he decided that instead of trying to flatter his political rival, he would request to borrow a book from that person's library. And his apparent political rival was quite happy to oblige. He lent him the book. And then when Franklin returned the book, he returned it with a thank you note. And what he observed after that interaction was that this person appeared to be fonder of him. He appeared to be kinder to him going forward. And they actually built a relationship from that onwards. And he would later go on to write, "He that has done you a kindness will be more ready to do you another." So it was this experience that then evolved into this idea of the Benjamin Franklin effect. And this relates quite well to the idea of cognitive dissonance theory, and that we want our behaviors and our actions to be able to match. And so when we do something for someone, our brain tends to then believe that we must actually like that person because we invested time into helping them. There is an emotional investment, an emotional connection that is created there. So it almost subconsciously tricks our brain into believing that if I was to do this for that person, then I must in some way care about this person. So that is why it has this ability to improve your relationships going forward as well. And this idea was also further supported by some research in psychology in the 1960s, where participants in a study had won some money, and they were divided into two groups. And one group was asked to personally return the money to the researcher, whereas the other group was not. And what they found was that the people who were asked to return the money to the researcher actually rated the researcher higher than the people that weren't asked to do that. So the people that actually did the researcher a favor saw the researcher in a more favorable light. And if you do want to learn more about the science of asking, there is also a really popular photocopy experiment that I talked about in my recent episode on 3 everyday words to use more at work. So make sure you check out that episode as well if you want to learn more about some of the science behind the power of asking. But applying this to your personal brand or your professional development, consider some of the ways that you can actually actively ask for more of the opportunities that you are seeking instead of trying to do everything yourself and to prove yourself all the time. And I know that this is something that we can potentially fall into, especially when it comes to personal branding and professional development, is always communicating value. And I talk about that a lot on this channel, about communicating the value that you have to offer, focusing on providing value. But that is why I thought this discussion was also really important, because you get so much out of asking as well. I actually remember, now that I think about this, my husband describing this to me as to everything that he's ever been able to achieve is because he asks so many questions. He will just constantly be so intrigued by how someone has done what they've done, or if there are potential ways to go about different things that maybe people haven't explored yet. He is constantly asking, and he brings back so much of his own success, or even just everyday wins that he has, back to having this particular trait. So, when it comes to your own personal brand or your own professional development, how can you ask for more opportunities? So, for example, are you asking for advice? Are you asking for mentoring? Are you asking for feedback? Are you asking questions? Are you asking for career progression tips? Are you asking for feedback on what is required from you to be able to access that next level of your career? Don't always assume that by asking it is going to be a withdrawal from your social capital, because it could actually be an investment into it. It could actually be that emotional connection that begins a relationship. People can't respond to things that they have never heard, or requests that they have never heard. Which also leads nicely into my point number 2, which is the asking gap. Now, this is something that I have touched on in my previous series on high value career habits. I talked about this in a couple of those episodes, particularly when it relates to the way that women compared to men ask for things in their career. So, for example, the research has shown that men are more likely to negotiate their starting salaries. There is some research that shows that they are, in some cases, 4 times more likely to negotiate their starting salary. And this can actually continue to widen that gap in your career, because it means that any sort of percentage based increases that you get in your salary from that point onwards, or any bonuses, are still going to be at a potential disadvantage if you hadn't negotiated a better salary to begin with. And this is something that I have been really fortunate enough to have done in a lot of my roles, pretty much most of my roles that I've ever had in marketing and communications. I have been fortunate enough to have known from those early negotiating stages that that was my best opportunity to be able to put myself in a better position going forward. And I saw what it was like for people that hadn't done that, because once you are often already in a role, it is a lot easier for people to not take those requests as seriously, or to focus more on the incoming talent into an organization than trying to make sure that they are giving you increases that you ideally should have negotiated better to begin with. So, this is something that I do feel is really interesting for women or men, if you actually have realized that you don't fall into that category of men who most often negotiate their starting salaries better than women. It's that opportunity to ask the question up front. And admittedly, this can sometimes be an issue for women as well, in that some research has shown that it can lead to situations where women appear to be a little bit more aggressive or difficult. But what I would say in that scenario is to try and find the organizations, particularly if you are looking to work with an organization for the first time, you're not there already. find the organizations that appreciate those traits about you, because they will exist. Some of the times when I have been able to successfully negotiate my salary increases, it has been with men. So you just need to be able to find your people, find the right people who are going to appreciate the value that you have to offer. Because remember that it is those seemingly small differences at the start of the role that will compound going forward. So they have the potential to affect your future salary, your future bonuses, your future super contributions, your future leverage that you have to negotiate your salary, or your career progression opportunities. The research has also shown, by the way, that men are more likely to negotiate their career progression, to negotiate things like promotions. So make sure that when it comes to your career and the opportunities that you are seeking, that you are asking for those opportunities. And at the very least, by asking, it means that you are putting your intentions out there. So even if it's something that your organization can't necessarily do for you straight away, at least they understand your intentions, or at least they can explain to you how it is that you can get to where it is that you want to go. You can understand where that gap is, what else you need to be doing, if it is even possible for you to get to that particular position in your organization, or if you need to consider other options. At least by asking, you will have more information in general. And the research actually doesn't stop there. It also shows that men are more likely to ask questions than women, which leads really nicely into my point number 3, which is the help seeking advantage. High performers don't ask less questions, they actually ask more questions. And the people that ask for help, advice, or input are actually often seen as more competent. There has been research that has been done by organisational psychologists, which created a simulation of different workplace scenarios. And in some scenarios, people asked for help or advice or input, and in others, they didn't ask for help. And in these scenarios, the ask might be framed as either strategic, it might be framed as dependent, or it could be framed as something like, could you do this for me? And what they found was that the people that were asking the questions were rated more favorably. They came across as more motivated, more competent, more goal orientated. And this was particularly the case when the way that they were asking the questions were framed in a more strategic way. So, for example, can you help me with this so that I can improve in this particular area? So, the key here was that it wasn't about asking for the sake of asking, because if the requests came across as passive or too dependent, then the ratings would drop. So it was about being strategic in the way that you are asking so that it aligns with this idea of growth. So remember that asking does not signal weakness. It signals your competence, your high performance, your growth orientation. Thanks so much. For more on all things personal branding, subscribe for more like this, and I'll see you in the next episode.